Good evening, everyone. You can all calm down now. Good evening. Welcome to the DN35 podcast. It is end of season slowdowns for us. But before we go on our hiatus, we are kindly joined by Andrew, Jason, and David, who have been, happy to come along and answer your questions. And I hope we've done our best to get as many up there as we can. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you again for doing so.
Absolute pleasure. It's good to be here. So it didn't sound like a question there. It's like, are we
sorry.
Is this the bit in the podcast where we talk to each other before the titles, or are we in it now?
Yeah, this is the cold. What they call it, a cold open, don't they? Is that what it is? Okay. And then we go into the episode. It's that's what they pay extra for on things like the Guardian Football Weekly. That's what they do their live shows for. We can make it profitable at some point. Look, we've done our best. There's so many questions. We will do our best to answer as many as we can. And if you don't feel like yours is answered, hopefully we'll have done our best to at least cover some of the topics. Thank you again for doing so. Sam, do you want me to go with you and we can start that way? Or, I guess the first question is, season's ended for all three of you. Well, it might feel like it's just beginning, but what lessons have been learned? Do you feel like you've learned more from this season you have done on the previous two, or what have been your reflections from the season that's just gone?
I'm happy to start. I mean, I wrote that article last week in The Guardian because people sort of get the sense that I do a lot of my thinking through writing to try and understand stuff and try to make sense of what's going on. And I think it's been a massive learning curve for us. Every year has been. But this for us has really been, the weight of expectation as we came out of last year. For all of us, right? We expected to kick on. We expected to be really challenging in the playoffs. And look, we got it wrong. So I apologised, on behalf of Andrew and myself, both in the programme notes and also in the paper in Guardian. So we got a load of things wrong, and we're open to that. And the important stuff is not getting stuff wrong; it's how you react and how you learn from it. And again, the most important part for the season for me, there's been many points we could go into, was the Doncaster game. I've talked ad nauseum about, so feel free to shut me up if there's a better question. But it was. It's less about the fact that we were making mistakes and more about how you react to mistakes and how you look around and see the people you're with and how they respond to that. And look, and credit to David and Sean and Ben and the whole team, quite frankly. Like, the response was brilliant. There was no sort of entrenched views. There was no lack of humility. There was a sense of do something different. And I'm more interested in that because that's the stuff we'll build for. We intend to be involved in the club long term, hopefully. And you learn more about yourself in those moments of adversity. And I think credit to David and the team that we got sort of a top half of the table form off the back of that. And it might not feel like that sometimes, but that's the reality.
I would add in terms of lessons learned that it's been, you get, as Jason says, you get to know people much better in times of adversity, and certainly myself and Jason's relationship, I think, has deepened if it could have any more during the course of the season, as we've had to make tough calls. I mean, the decision to change manager is never an easy one, unless you're the owner of Watford, I guess, where you do it every couple of weeks. But no, we're that decision we took very seriously. I think some people would have said probably the prior season, or even the season before that, we should have made a change. But we felt it was the right moment to make the change for various reasons, and that was again a process that we hadn't gone through before. Equally, we hadn't gone through the process of recruiting a new manager, and again getting the help of not just of Jason, but all the people around us who helped us in that process, whether that was Gareth or the 21st group. Obviously, Debbie was also part of the process, and we've ended up with David, and that's. We're obviously delighted to be where we are today. So loads and loads of lessons learned, and I'm sure there'll be lots more next season. It's far from being a finished article. And one thing that's been very disappointing is that we always wanted to make progress every season, and this season has felt like we haven't made progress, and that's why I think we felt it was necessary to apologise, and it is disappointing when you're custodians of an institution everyone's so passionate about to take steps back. But I think life tells you that it's never a straight line, and hopefully the steps back will help us step forward.
Okay. From my point of view, I think the biggest learning curve was understanding that some players can't run before they can walk, and that was a pivotal mistake I made in the early days. Having had some early promise, some players found it really tough then to build on that and use that as a foundation. So I think every single person at the football club was enthused after MK Dons, and they somehow thought I was some sort of Paul Daniels taller version, lookalike kind of person, because we went to MK Dons and played really well and should have beaten them. 6 weeks later, everyone's finding it a bit tough, and me doubling down on it's okay, you'll get there, and I know we'll come on to data, and the data said we're heading in the right direction. So you do believe that. Unfortunately, it got a bit worse. The results, didn't it? That's what it was. Now the data wasn't suggesting we should have been getting beat, but we were. So the critical thing is we had to change, and it's always easier to go back to being hard to beat. The team had been built on being hard to beat. Hursty had built a team, an out of possession team, and it's much more difficult to get success that way. Much more difficult because you're actually not in control of it. You're allowing the opposition to dictate how they play. So we've got to change that. We've got to change that over this summer. Not to the extent that we did do when I first walked in the building, but we've certainly got to be much better in possession. We should have scored far more goals in the last 10, 15 games, whatever it is, and we didn't. And we've got to build on that and improve that so that we do become good at both ends of the pitch, or better at both ends of the pitch. So the biggest thing for me was, after initial enthusiasm and success, don't always take that as gospel that the players can do it, because it didn't work out like that for the next 10 games, and we had to change something drastically, and we did. And as Jason and Andrew just said, the credit to the players mainly. They understood their roles much better without the football, and it was easier to set them up not to get beat, and that's exactly what we did, and we managed to win games of football doing it like that. But we can't just rely on that for the whole season.
It's great to know, David, that that's in the locker, isn't it? As an option to turn to if you need to.
Yeah, I always think it's easier to not concede than it is to score a goal, and I think that's been proven since I've been at the football club. Yes, was we a bit expansive, possibly, but the players were having a right good go, and we're trying to create reproducible goals, which sounds, I'm not sure if that sounds a bit left field or not, but we are trying to create things that we can repeat time and time again, and the data will tell us that whether we can do that or not.
It's funny that, because that's something we commented on at the very beginning of the season. It reminded me when we were doing a review last week. At the start of the season, we had a conversation here where we were very reliant on Aboisa smashing it in from 35 yards out, and I think one of the conversations was we don't seem to be scoring worked goals. I assume, is that sort of the similar sort of?
Yes,
we'll take credit. Yeah.
You guys are obviously way ahead of.
Yeah, absolutely.
Way ahead of me, of course. That's the kind of thing we're talking about. You only have to look up the road at Bradford. They got in the playoffs last year, and they relied on Andy Cook scoring a gazillion goals. And suddenly they found themselves 20th in the league or whatever it was until the last sort of 10 games of the season. And then they had a late charge for the playoffs like Doncaster did. Whereas that last season for me, Bradford, was luck. You get them seasons, and we've got to build. When I say sustainably, I mean repeatedly. And there's underlying metrics that we can use that tells us whether we're doing that. And I don't want to get caught up on data, and because I know that it's a big thing, and there's some hearts and minds that believe that's not a good thing, and but at the same time, it can tell us some stuff. And one of the things it can tell us is whether we're actually progressing in certain areas or not progressing in other areas, and that you can use that as an objective reference point. And as long as you understand what it means, and there's no bias to it, obviously there isn't because it's objective, then it can actually make you go in a certain direction, if you like, and that's what it's there for. So we know that if we improve in certain areas over the summer, the areas that we're weak in, and that comes from hearts and minds as well as just pure raw data. We can't just rely on data, otherwise I won't have a job. So we don't want to do that. But we do want to use both brains and sort of us as coaches and as human beings. And if we get emotion and all this sort of passion, all them kind of things mixed in with raw talent that we think we can recruit, then we'll do much better.
So yeah, that kind of leads nicely on. So it's fair to say that the sort of modal topic asked when we put this out to ask fans what they want to ask was about data. So to kind of drill out on that, what is the best way to describe this, I think, is what is basically the relationship between the 21st group, the head of recruitment, and the manager, and where does data fit into that, and the game model? Basically explain the recruitment process. It's not a very elegant way of putting it, but I think you know what I mean.
Okay. Obviously, there's lots of, you can use data in lots of different ways and lots of data points, but you've got to use data that you truly believe in, that is consistent in its approach. Now, I don't want to give too much away, but we're all familiar with XG now. Goals scored is a stat. Now, there is much more depth to data nowadays that tells us certain things. Now, how we go about when we include sort of game model and how we want to play, there are certain metrics that we can use that tells us whether a player is particularly good at that, and the bit that we're missing. Obviously, goals is an obvious one. If we want a 30 goal a man, thankfully we've got a very good one and a couple of others, then we all are aware of that because it's accepted. But there's lots of other sort of metrics underneath that can lead us in a certain direction. And as coaches and as employees of the football club, I'm not sat here now saying that I know all the answers, because I just don't. Whereas if I can use data and we can use data as a football club and be really smart and you find undervalued talent that fits our model, then we're going to be onto a winner. And that's the challenge. Now, will that all happen in the next sort of 14 weeks? Well, that is a real stiff challenge, because it's, we've got to bring in 10, 11, 12 players, which is a lot. It's a lot. We didn't want to bring in any more than that, really. But we can use data to, lead us, really. But at the same time, there's subjective opinion and objective data, and one's not more important than the other. We've just got to get to make sure we get to the right answer, and that's how data works. And it's a check-in and balancing process, really. That's how it works.
Andrew, you go.
If I could just build a little bit on that from the perspective of recruitment, I think the best analogy I can come up with is that you're better to do your shopping on Amazon than you are to do your shopping in a corner shop. And so by doing your shopping on Amazon, it means you're looking at the whole universe of potential goods that you might acquire. In this case, obviously, it's football players, but you're looking at the entire universe, and you're using the power of the engine to down select down to a list of players that might fulfill the criteria that you're looking at. Whereas if you were not going to Amazon, you were actually going to your local corner shop, you're stuck with what's in your local corner shop. If you think about your local corner shop as being what the scout might see, using his own eye test and his own network, compared to Amazon, where you can actually see everything that's happening, which is where we have access to that quality of analysis. You can narrow down the choices and make the job of David and Joe and the team much easier to select those players with the attributes that are undervalued, that are the right age profile. But you're still not going to get all the answers, as David said, from data. You're going to have to look into their personality. You're going to have to look into their background. You're going to have to look into what biscuit choices they choose. Lots of things are still really important that as to the type of player that you choose. And I think people get a little bit obsessed by saying, okay, well, just because his XG is, or the XGA of that particular player is so good that you're going to choose them. That's not the case. Then the other thing that comes into it is budget, and we're trying to find players that are undervalued from that perspective. And again, we've alluded to this a couple of times, by looking overseas as well as looking in the UK market. You're not just looking at Amazon UK, you're looking at Amazon Global, and so you're getting a different choice of players, and hopefully the magic of the data can help to identify that short list of players that is going to be better than perhaps other people can find.
Yeah, I think that's a really good analogy, Andrew, which sort of helps me understand it a lot more. Now, tell me if I'm oversimplifying a little bit, but to me, when you say data, it's facts, so it's factually correct that this player scores goals, or it's factually correct that this player plays X amount of passes. So we use facts in everything we do throughout our lives to lead us to decisions. But then in terms of you, David, I suppose there's still a lot of feel there, because you may have real good stats for somebody 2 divisions down, but you've got to assess, well, can he make that step up? Or you may have less good stats, somebody 2 divisions up, but you think, well, if he plays in a slightly different team, I think we can bring more out of him there. So it leads you to a place, but you still got to interpret that and have a feel for it, I would have thought. If I might be wrong.
No, you're absolutely spot on. Absolutely spot on. That's where it's not an exact science. You can use data to have that objective feel, but ultimately we're talking about human beings, and there's loads of factors. If I said to you, right, we could get a lad who fits in our budget, who we think is good enough, but he's from Bromley or anywhere in London, really. That I said Bromley because I know you were talking about it a minute ago before we went live. They might not want to move. We've had players go, no, I'm not moving because my wife's pregnant. Well, it's fully understandable, but you've already got down that whole data process filtering, and you find that out, and you go, right, that's done. Unless it fits into their how they see things going forward, the player. So that there's lots and lots of things, and that's where the sort of art form comes in, where you've got to, not persuade in a bad way, because you don't want to persuade anyone to come to the football club against their will, because they just won't come. But at the same time, you've got to sell the football club. It's a competitive market, so that's what we've got to do, so that there's a creche on Cleethorpes Road, and with loads of little footballers, kids running around in come August, kind of thing. But yeah, there's lots of factors to consider, and everything from family to fit to levels played at to experience to injury history, budget, salary, the whole works, and that's the tricky bit, really.
Mike, I mean, I guess I think I probably part of the problem here, that in terms of the way that I didn't fully explain how we were using it in the first conversation, because it's something I've done for nearly 25 years in my businesses. I probably made the assumption that people would understand. So, for me, it's about making better decisions and trying to find an edge in the world. But ultimately, football, at least half of it will be whites to the eyes, David, all those things David just mentioned there. Can we attract players to the club? But it's about, it feels like there are three defined areas that people can compete in. You can either overspend. If you look at the top three teams in our division here, they've all spent £4 million on their squads, right? And substantiated losses of that sort of order of magnitude. We can't do that, right? You can go the other way, which is you can just try and find something unique in data and some sort of edge technologically, or from your training or your coaching or whatever. And again, we think that's part of what we're trying to do. Or hopefully, the way of increasing your probability of success is, for us, is being in the middle of that, which is we think that we can create something that will be competitive from a budget point of view, but we'll have an edge through the way we use data, which is quite rare at our level, by the way. I mean, people talk about everyone's got the same data. They genuinely haven't. That's part of the 21st group's insight for us, is that we're trying to do stuff that teams in higher divisions definitely do. But around sort of our level, there aren't that many teams that are thinking like this. And so what we're trying to do is trying to find a way that we can be competitive on our budget, have an edge in the data, and then have innovative coaching and styles of play that makes an attractive place to come. And all we're trying to do is increase our probabilities of success. Whether it works or not, time will tell. But we can't overspend because we haven't got access to that type of resources. And nor should you, I don't think. I mean, when you're losing £4 million a year, which all the top three claims, I mean, 4 million would be conservative. Wrexham might be even 6 to 8, right? I do think that's not sustainable in the current climate, and that's dependent on the owners or the investors being interested and staying interested. So we don't want to put that risk in the club. But we think that combination of spend the right amount, get an edge with data, and then innovative coaching and styles of play should increase our probabilities of success. It never will guarantee it, but it should increase our probability of success.
Jason, this might be going down a wormhole of my own liking, but with data, my mind does go to Moneyball. Do you think there is an on-base percentage stat in football that is overlooked?
No, I don't. And I think that's the thing where the Moneyball analogy breaks down. I think football has so many more variables and is so unpredictable. Moneyball isn't a good analogy. What you can do, though, is if, like, the analogy I've been giving people, and maybe I haven't explained this fully, is like, look, if we have a right back, and we're looking at trying to replace that right back, we have a style of play, and we know the characteristics that right back will need in terms of athleticism, in terms of technical ability, in terms of, basically all the skills you can see in a professional athlete. The bit that you can't assess, which is down to David and the team, is attitude, character, propensity to be able to take on information, learning curve that they will go on as well. And I just think there are so many more variables in football. And so I think, but what you can do is you can help yourself narrow the funnel of choices by looking at objective metrics. But it's still at least half of it, maybe more. I don't know what the right metric is for that, where you're going to need character assessment of their ability to take information and learn, develop, all that stuff that David's great at. And I think that's the bit where, I think people have thought with this Moneyball analogy, which a lot of people don't really understand, Alex, as well, I think, is like there is a way that you can create a model in baseball that looks at undervalued players and build a team around that. Well, I think football has much more multivariant, variables that are implied in the game, and I think that's why it sort of breaks down. But I do think you can create a better decision-making process by bringing data into the conversation. And that's probably what I should have said a couple of years ago, rather than rattling on about data.
I agree. I think it's an interesting. I've always tried to look at it. There's a couple of books on it that, Soccer Economics is pretty good, where it says blonde players are more likely to stand out than players with brown hair and alike, which is always quite an interesting thing. Graham, you're asking about Moneyball. Yeah. It's it was a process done in the 90s by the Oakland A's in terms of trying to use data, and on-base percentage was kind of the overlooked one, which showed that they didn't hit anything, but they moved on to first base, which allowed them to score runs, and it meant that you could buy players that were undervalued, and it's kind of changed baseball. And Billy Bean he works with Spurs now and like, doesn't he now? I think the guy who
And Barnsley, this
did it.
Barnsley, isn't it? I think it's one of the investors gets the group behind Barnsley.
Is he
I think
really?
that's changed, but yeah, I think so.
Him
Yeah.
and- Have we hooked into James McAtee to get some data back on it?
All you need to know is John McAtee scores bangers, doesn't he? Still,
Ja-
and so
yeah.
we miss him. But,
Why did I say James? I went higher. Sorry, John. Right, Mike, over to you, mate.
Yeah. So another question we had a lot of questions from fans on is about the FA Cup. We had good questions from Chris, Stephen, and Dan. I think it's important to recognise, Jason, and the club, that you guys have been at the forefront of the sort of fallout from this with other EFL clubs. So firstly, I think, David, we'd like to get your view on the issue with the FA Cup replays, because I don't think from the media I've heard you've had the opportunity to give a view. And secondly, Jason and Andrew, I think it's fair to say a lot of football fans are massively angry at the FA seemingly just taking away one of the biggest bargaining chips the EFL had in negotiations with the Premier League. So whilst the media's gone quiet and things have started to die down a bit, what's the next steps? We can't let I think a lot of people would say we can't let the Premier League and the FA get away with this. So what can EFL clubs do? What can we do? Is a boycott viable or likely? So where are we with that?
Shall I go first quickly, in my views? The uproar from FA Cup replays is fully justified. There wasn't the same clamour amongst the top level when they were increasing Champions League games and worrying about burnout. We all know that it's physically more demanding at the top of the game than it is in lower down, the lower you get. However, by allowing them to increase the Champions League to get more money at the expense of FA Cup replays, it's just ridiculous. In my eyes, it's ridiculous. I can understand why the top clubs want to do it, but that's to the detriment of the actual football pyramid. Some clubs this season, I can't think off the top of my head, but some clubs next season will rely on FA Cup money to remain sustainable at whatever level that is. And that doesn't mean whether it's our level, a league or two above, or anywhere down to step 6, 7, or 8. And that's the crucial thing. And the big clubs have they've got too much power, and the FA haven't done their job, in my eyes. And the fact that the National League have got into bed with them stinks. But I'll let the two main men speak about it, really.
Well, again, I think
that's spot on, David. Good.
I mean, Jason and I both feel the same about this. It's completely outrageous what's been done. It's just a complete stitch up between the FA and the Premier League, and ultimately the FA's been persuaded by money, by another word, to give something up that they didn't need to give up, and for the Premier League clubs to insist that first and second round replays are abolished makes absolutely no sense. I mean, zero sense. There's already no replays, I think, from the sixth round, or certainly fifth or sixth round. So we're talking about a couple of weekends, and so from that, and we're only talking about protecting potentially now 4 clubs that will be playing in the Champions League. So it's just a complete stitch up.
I think. Sorry, Andrew, to go in. There's one pertinent point, literally from this season. There's only one club in the top 6 currently that's played an FA Cup replay this year, and that's Villa, who are still in Europe. Everyone else has been knocked out.
There've only been 10 in the last 10 years.
It's ridiculous.
So 10 clubs that were in Europe have played an FA Cup replay during their European season. So it's basically the classic sledgehammer to crack a nut analogy in that respect. You're right, David. Also about the National League cozying up rather weirdly with the Premier League, and I do. There's obviously going on in the background is this whole parliamentary process going on in relation to the football finance bill and the new regulator, and the Premier League is desperate to basically either kick it in the long grass or water down the powers of the regulator entirely, so they're left to their own devices. I find it quite perverse that the National League is seeing an alignment with the Premier League in anything, unless again it's down to money and down to some promise that's been made in a back alley by the Premier League clubs to the National League, that they're going to be looked after, because they recognise that in terms of numbers, the National League is similar size to the EFL, but obviously in terms of prestige and everything else is completely different. I'm pleased to say that not every National League club, far from it, is taking the same view as their regulator or as the people that they represent. There is a groundswell of discussion between clubs about being public about objecting to this, and we will be participating in an active way in that process, which will start. So this issue hasn't gone away. It's something that we really want. We really think needs to be reversed.
Would you just
to build
really
on that?
quickly
My point is that there will be stuff over the next few days. So over the weekend, there's been a number of conversations between clubs about how we come. In fact, I think there'll be stuff in the paper by the time this pod comes out about a bunch of clubs standing together. But there are two things at play, right? The issue itself of, like, to David's point about overworked players, you can probably accept that. It's like you want the game, and this is the irony, right? You want to preserve the Premier League. It's a brilliant product. It's a different product to what we experience in so many different ways. I don't really watch it anymore, to be honest, but I get how we want to preserve that as a national asset and something we can be proud of. So there's the issue of people being overplayed. That's one thing. I think that can be resolved one way or another. There's a thing about just how it was handled. That was the thing for me. It just spoke to a type of entitlement and privilege, and then the way the National League handled it. I was on Twitter the other day. It's embarrassing for them, that they, when they came out, they were lobbying in Parliament, with the Premier League. Well, just made no sense whatsoever. And then, like, a week later, they've got this muted under 23s tournament or something like that. That's just so embarrassing that they're prepared to cozy up for a short-term gain of a few quid over a few years, rather than trying to think. It's slightly counterintuitive to self-interest, which is there's a real opportunity with the regulator to define the standards of sustainability for football for the next 100 years. And that's the opportunity, irrespective of whether, we expected there be a separate payment this year. We hope there would be. There isn't. But in the scheme of it, we go, actually, if you get to a better settlement at some point that makes football sustainable, and the point I always make, which bores people again, is that what the guys, the Premier League, really missed the point, and they failed to see this argument, is that all of their successes are built on 120, 130 years of everyone's endeavour. So the fact the music's stopping now in the last 20 years, since they've been at the top of the tree, and they take the profits from that, is just so immoral. The game is not a traditional business in the same way the businesses are, and therefore we need to think about how we sustain the football pyramid for the next 100 years at least, and actually think about the people that have created that value, all of us. So I've made this point again and again, but it's just, I think that a lot of the owners are somewhat detached from the impact of their clubs in their communities. But this was just another example of the Premier League trying to do something tactically that took that negotiation chip off the table. And the National League should be ashamed. They're embarrassed that they took that chip and thought, eating today is something that they can help. Well, something that they've done that does take away from resolving the long-term challenges for the game.
Because I think there's an awful lot.
Bring back re-election to punish them.
There's an awful lot of landing ground between where we were 2-3 weeks ago with replays at every round and where we are now. You could talk about seeding in Premier League teams, or changing the venue for lower league teams. So there was lots there, and that's all seems to be gone, which to me and most football fans just stinks of the big six deciding to waltz into football and say, right, this is how it's going to be. So it's good to hear that, even though it's gone quiet in the media, there will be. There needs to be a line, in my point of view, that we can't just let them keep doing this.
Yeah, no, look, for me, the regulator isn't going to be a panacea. It's going to be helpful. Look, the EFL and Premier League, largely due to the Premier League, have failed to make an offer even, let alone, there's no settlement because there hasn't been an offer. And so for me, I'm not a fan of regulation for its sake. But these are protected types of assets in a different way to other businesses. And the only way I can see this being resolved is through legislation. And look, none of us want legislation for its sake. And the argument about legislation creep and destroy, I don't think that's true. I think the Premier League is such a sufficiently strong product. Everyone in football wants to protect that because it's such a great asset. But what we also want to do is it's not an either or. It should be that the whole of the pyramid has a way of being sustainable. And look, and even this year's delay till the regulator comes in, and it looks like it's got universal appeal in Parliament or consensus at least. There'll be clubs that go to the wall in the next year as a result of this. There are a number of clubs that are struggling, and we can name a few that are in the public, and there's some that aren't in the public domain. So again, this is existential. I know there's an argument that clubs don't go out of existence. And obviously, but when you enter administration or you go down to the 10th tier, it's a generation of people. I have it in Macclesfield now, near where I live. It's like there's a generation of kids that won't see the standard of football that they deserve because of the way that the game is structured. And it's immoral, I think. So I'm hoping that the regulator will solve this, but there's definitely twists and turns before then. It's
one of the reasons why I don't understand the National League's purpose or response to this, given that round one and two replays don't benefit us. They don't benefit EFL clubs. A game at Plymouth and a replay sounds terrible. Never mind, it won't be the money spinner we hope for, but it is for Alv Church at Cheltenham and Weymouth and anybody else. So that's what makes
Cray Valley at Charlton last year.
Yeah,
that's not the reason Liverpool went out the cup. Because Cray Valley had a game at Charlton.
I'm sure Klopp would use it as an excuse.
Well, he should beat Shrewsbury away from home then if he don't want to play more games.
Right. So, let's move on. The fun topic that everyone likes to ask, Blundell Park and what changes are being made. I know we spoke probably last year, and it tends to be we find something wrong with Blundell Park every year. Are we safe in the knowledge that no bolts have been found this year and no emergency works are need done? I know you guys talked last year about the main stand being upgraded and some poles being taken out. Is that going to be going on this year, or what else I heard as well about additional toilets and disabled facilities as well in the main stand as well? Is that right?
No, there's two main things happening, Alex. Firstly, the new disabled toilets in the Finders actually, or in the unnamed stand. In the trust bar, where again the trust is funding the expansion of the toilets and the men's toilets and the addition of a disabled toilet in that area, which is much needed. The main work the club is funding is in the main stand, where for safety requirements we need to take out the posts on as you're facing it from the other side, the left side of the stand, the oldest part of the stand. We need to take those posts out and replace them with steel. They're wooden posts that sit on sand, basically. So but they've been sitting on stand for a long time. It's quite a big job.
I'll stick in there to fall down. You sound like it's going to fall down on me.
No, it was quite safe, but it reached a point where we needed to. And you probably noticed this season, Sam, that there were some extra wooden pieces put up in to hold them to make sure they didn't fall down on people. But yeah, that work started. It started yesterday, and essentially there's going to be a big steel beam going in across about 50% of the stand, and then 4 posts put up. So John Tonder will have less posts when he does come back for his guest appearance at some point next season. We'll have less posts to peer around when he's doing his commentary.
Sorry, Sam. When Andrew said it was quite safe, he meant it's absolutely safe. I think that's when you're thinking it's very high quality sand that we had under that stand.
Yeah,
shipped in from Malaga.
When you're 20 years, you hear, "Oh yeah, the post hold up by sand." You're kind of like, "Do I need to move my season ticket round?"
Yeah, it's good quality sand, as Jason said.
It's really high.
It's been shipped in specially. And David made a comment at the start of his thing that Blundell Park is a very nice place to come to. What changes are being made to make it not a nice place to come to for away fans? And we talk about it ad nauseum on here. Are there any changes in mind to make the atmosphere at Blundell Park better, given we were all quite taken aback with how popular season tickets were once you guys took over. It probably hasn't helped the atmosphere. Is there any thought process in that? We were disappointed. I was disappointed personally that there isn't sort of a thought process going into the Osmond, perhaps into terms of creating an atmosphere area.
Yeah, look, it's a good question, Alex. And again, it's been a victim of, I guess, the fantastic support that everyone's given over the last couple of years in particular. And now sort of people have picked their season tickets. It's difficult to try and reallocate those. But I spoke to Christine about this last week. We're definitely trying to think about it. And one of the suggestions was our ticketing system is better than it was, but it isn't as sophisticated as we want it to be. But there could be a way that if we pick a couple of games where there's going to be a massive away support, then we might allow people for a game or so to swap out into the Osmond. And the idea, we could test it, right? Is like the worst thing we could do is spend a load of time and effort people changing the seats and then finding that you don't change the atmosphere at all. So in the spirit of like experimentation and open-mindedness, I thought it might be a reasonable idea to say, look, if we pick a particular game where we know we're going to get, half a dozen, or I won't mention any teams, obviously that'd be ungenerous on me. But the idea of like, well, we know we're only going to get 50 or 60 people coming, that we could open the Osmond up and say, look, if people want to swap and then make it that a singing end for a couple of games and see if that works. And again, the guys in the ticket office will probably kill me for the practical implications of this, but we're keen to do it. We've all been there this year where, particularly when the upper gets going now, but there seems to be, a group of people up there that really get things going. It does change it, and I don't think David said it's a
have
nice.
The stewards top telling Andrew to stop singing and screaming and shouting from the upper? Is that what it is?
He just gets these things going again, doesn't he? So, but David, are they misquoting you? I don't know if you said it was a nice place to come.
I think what I meant is you come down that, when you're an away team, you come down that long motorway that feels never ending until you literally drive into the sea. And then you come into, Grimsby and Cleethorpes, and you go, okay. And you just sort of accept it. Like, I just think that it can be, don't get me wrong, let me tell you this. We have got some of the best fans that I've certainly played with. Or certainly, the fans are like levels above crew fans, for example, like levels above. Right? And the crew fans will tell you the same, that, because it's just, that is a nice club in that sense. I feel as though when we walk out, and I have to say, I know the guy's face, but I don't actually know his name. The guy on the mic before the game, he does a cracking job at getting everyone going. Then 5 minutes later, it's like, and it's like, I agree. No, keep that going for another 15 minutes. Get us through until we get a second wind. Come on. Now, if we score in that period, it does that automatically. And I appreciate the onus is always on us or the players, if you like, to keep that atmosphere up. That's always going to be the case. But the best example I can give, really, that made a difference was the MK Dons game after about an hour. They had all the ball. They're a really good team. That's how they set up. But the fans, I think, realised, hang on, the lads need us here, but we're having a right good go. And they just carried us through for half an hour. It makes such a difference when you're all in it together and you feel it. It's palpable. And everyone, we're all human beings. We all know what that means and what it looks like and what it feels like and what it sounds like. And it's like, can we replicate that every game? Now, I appreciate I'm asking maybe a bit too much, but at the same time, we're all in it together. We all want the same thing. We all want the best for Grimsby Town Football Club. So if we can do that, it does make a difference. I went to watch Wrexham about 5 or 6 times, all at home at the start of the season, watching teams that basically come and visited them. Wrexham scored in every game in the last 10 minutes. Every game. Why? Not because they played great football and bopped teams off the park. It's because the fans stuck with them and didn't half get behind them. They were on that momentum shift. And it's like, come on, that's the difference. And when you go to these places and you see different atmospheres, you notice it. And whereas most fans just go to their place, and as in like their home ground, to see their own atmosphere. I appreciate we travel in big numbers, which is fantastic. And it's like you sometimes see it then, but it's like it's only that much, but it might be that much that gets us a win or makes us not conceding that crucial moment, or and it's all them little bits, and all them little bits add up. That's what I meant by that, really.
So the idea, I guess, a question back to you guys, and generally we're really open-minded about if there are ideas, and it feels like if we can do something in a couple of those games and just see if people respond to that. But the bit that worries me is like, I don't know, it's like also work dues where you're told at certain times of year you can have a work day, it's got to be fun, and it's like you're told you've got to go and do this. And I worry about it being, we can't create the atmosphere by partitioning the stadium or whatever it is. It's like it's got to be organic from the supporters. So I think the best idea was try and do maybe a game where there's a big away fan and see if that does it. But again, if we say to him on February the 28th, come and create an atmosphere, even that feels a bit weird. Right? So we're definitely open to suggestions. And again, Christine's thought a lot about it. She's our go-to on this stuff because she's obviously the SLO and connected to the fan base in a way that we're maybe not. So yeah, I don't know if there's other ideas you guys wanted to float, but we're definitely open to it. We want it, and we know, whilst David talks about the positive effect, the opposite's also true. We've all been sat in BP when it's like a library or you can hear people chatting. It's fucking weird, isn't it? It's like, I can imagine that transmitting to the players. It just doesn't feel right. And so, if we could find a way of creating that energy and electricity through the stadium we transmit to the players, of course we would love that.
Yeah, I think sorry, Andrew. Yeah.
No, what I was going to say is, for example, I think it's better when the drummers smashing away in the pontoon. And I think that that sort of thing makes a big difference. But I kind of echo what Jason said. Let's get ideas from the fans, and we're happy to think about how to support that happening. So let's try and be innovative and try and make BP different to everywhere else where people come, and make it a bear pit. And actually, and try and make it a bit more of a hostile place for all the opposition players and fans.
I do like Nick Rook's idea that free bar would help everyone singing, but I'll be entirely honest. I think there's a point in which our fans get far too drunk, and then it gets to the sleepy part of it, which we've had at second half at times. I think the idea is just to try and facilitate a better atmosphere rather than, you will have fun at 3:15 and 3:30, but no longer. And the problem we have, and I think with the conversation we have ad nauseum here, is a terrace is a fluid and a live thing. If you've got a hangover, you don't have to stand in the middle like you used to. You can go stand at the end and use a post to hold you up. But with a seat, you can't do that. You're stuck where you are. And it's quite similar to the housing crisis. You can't move anyone out the way. So even though they should have moved to the main stand maybe 20 years ago, they're still sat in the pontoon when they was in 1994. If we can find a little bit of space, it's similar to what Luton did before they were going up through the leagues. The last time we played them, they moved their fans who wanted to make a bit of a racket next to the away fans. And I guess, Kenilworth Road isn't too far away from Blundell Park in some ways. So if we can get that sort of space where fans can do that, it might even then open up better seats for fans to take up for season tickets. But I understand it would require you to have almost 2 season ticket seats in the smaller part of the Osmond and the larger part of the Osmond if it was to become a more permanent thing. But I think you should try it. You never know what will happen. But it's not just, fans shouldn't expect the players to be the ones that get them up for it. That's never been the Grimsby way. 20 years, what's our EFL average position? 89th. I don't think that's necessarily the case. So it would be nice to, be able to do something to help as well. And we're always happy to support, but I don't want to annoy Christine anymore. I think she's only just forgiven me for the mariachi thing. I'll pass over to you, Mike. Oh, Sam, sorry, you were going to...
Yeah, sort of changing tack completely. So you've appointed a new CEO, Polly Brancroft. Just kind of curious about, people asked about when did she start, what stood out about her, and as Ben Ranshaw asked, what did you cook her for tea, Jason, to tip the balance?
Well, I mean, Andrew can chip in here, but like she was just exceptional. I mean, she's got a long pedigree in football. So, you know, she was at Brighton, she's been at FIFA, and obviously most recently in the women's game at United. So, you know, some of the biggest clubs in the UK, arguably the world, and actually has looked both from a governance point of view and a commercial point of view at the opportunity. We wanted someone that was aligned to our values, so someone that cares about not just being ambitious for the football club on the field, but ambitious for the football club in the community as well. And that definitely, she definitely has that in spades. And then, you know, quite frankly, you know, we did someone that was hungry for the opportunity as well. You know, this is her first CEO role. And, you know, there's a lot of ideas and a lot of energy to bring to that. And he's showing the commitment as she's moving to the area. So, I mean, that's not a trivial decision for someone to come and take a new job and move to the area. So she's committing to us. And so but like on a fundamental level, just a really decent person, really rational, really calm, really thoughtful, really reflective. We really just enjoyed the conversations. General point around when you interview people, I always think that, having done this like thousands of times throughout my career, the people I'm really interested in are the ones that don't let you ask a question because they come to an interview wanting to interview you about the opportunity and what they can do. David had that, and Polly had that. You know, Polly, our last interview, we had 2 hours with them. We didn't ask her a question because she was curious about what we wanted to do, our ambition, how we would approach things, how we thought about the world, and not just about football, by the way. And that's just a real measure of someone that's got an inquiring mind and someone that's curious about the world. So she came late in the day. So she came like at the last interview 3 till 5. So it was too late for lunch and too early for dinner. So I didn't get to cook or anything. So, but she was, it was brilliant. And really, you know, we had when my last business, we had one question that we used to ask each other when we interviewed and had the wrap up of an interview. And the question is, and if we use this, is like, as a group, are you excited about the thought of working with this person? And if you're not, you shouldn't hire them. And we said the same thing about David. We said the same about Polly's like, Christ, I'm excited about us starting and like thinking about how we can move the club on. And this is not disparaging about people that have come before. Everyone's done a good job for us and they took us to a certain level. But I just think where we are, and it's slightly perverse based off our league position as we finished last week, but I'm really excited about the future, about the people we've got in place, about the culture we've got in place, about the data, unfortunately, that for some people that we've got in place, about the culture that we're generating. We're ambitious for this town and for this football club. And I think we've got the people to kick it on. So, yeah, just she starts first week of June. She's going to the EFL a conference with Andrew first week of June. So I don't know, Andrew, if you had anything different to that, but
no,
really
I can only echo all that. She's a fabulous person. I mean, super organised. You know, again, comes with a great football pedigree, which, you know, I think will really aid the connection between the club and the Cheapside and Blundell Park, if you like, in terms of that part of things. And yeah, you know, she's a class act, and I, like Jason, very excited for when she gets started. And you know, having a young family and kind of uprooting them from the other side of the Pennines and bringing them over to the right side of the Pennines is also good to see as well.
I just want to add one more thing.
Notes the post date for November.
Sorry, she basically. I'd like to just mention like Adam Smith though. In the interim period, he's done a brilliant job, not just holding the fort, but there are a number of strategic things that we're looking at. So just a shout out and credit to Adam Smith, who's been brilliant in the club since he's been here, years before we got here. But he's, as interim CEO, he's done a fantastic job at not just holding the fort, but moving the club forward as well. So yeah, just good credit where it's due. Adam's done a fantastic job for us.
I've got a picture.
Sorry, Sam,
of
I missed
him
that last comment.
Nah, there's nothing. It's gone now. It was off the next question.
I was going to say I've got a picture of me and Adam dressed as Laurel and Hardy when we were 8, so I can always send that over if you need any leverage with him.
Which one was Laurel and which one was Hardy?
He was, yeah, obviously he was, you know, you can take your guess. You go, Mike.
Yeah, just a quick one for Jason, Andrew. You said when you came in that you were not looking for a new investment, and there would be a time in the future where you'd look to progress that and look to bring that in. But I don't know if it's me, but I may have heard little hints in some of the interviews you've done recently about you might be getting close to that. Is that something you're looking at yet, trying to get some more outside investment, or is it still very much something in the future?
No, it's something that's very much in the present, and we're we recognise that in order to move the club on, that we can't just rely on Jason and my shoulders. So yeah, we've got a number of people that are actually in a very advanced state of process in the final kind of rounds of agreeing documents. So yeah, and again, until they're signed, we won't kind of talk names, but the great thing is they like us. They have real connection with the club, both as fans, but also through family. So that combination is continuing. And then we also have one or two other people again who have connections with sport in general and the club, who are kind of slightly further afield, who are hopefully also going to join with us. So yeah, we're hopeful that the shareholder roster will be bolstered in the next few weeks.
Jason, I assume the new Starlink you got is not to do with an investment package deal. Not that you can speak about it, obviously.
That's just more about the fact that I was having to do all my Zoom calls with my camera off for the last 18 months. So that's more practical than that.
If they start arriving in Teslas, Sam, we'll write to the Guardian. Any questions else, Mike, you want to follow up on from that?
Yeah.
Or do we want to just rattle through them so we can?
I was just got a question for David from Davies. What criteria do you consider when you bring a young player in on loan, and do their parent club set an expectation how many games or minutes they play? And just on top of that, I would say is when you're looking at game models and how to play football, are you as well, maybe as a minor point, but thinking to some of the bigger teams and thinking they will be more likely to want to send their players to us when we play a certain way that is more indicative to how they're trying to play?
Your last point is 100% true. If we just whacked it forward, you don't expect players from any of the top two divisions, really. That's the bottom line. So you have to play a certain way for them to even entertain letting their young prized assets out on loan. So that's the first thing. That's one of the benefits of trying to do things, play football in a certain way. In terms of do they set parameters, the answer to that is no, not. They don't insist on. They certainly don't say, right, you must play him or you must not play him. They don't say he has to play a certain amount of games or he doesn't. There's never anything like that. But there may be something like, well, you can have him for X amount of pounds. And if he plays so many games, he stays at X amount of pounds. But if he only plays X amount of pounds, it goes up to X amount of pounds. So there's sort of financial penalties to a point. But then we certainly don't do that when we loan out our players. All I ask is that they play the first couple of games. And if they don't do very well, then that's on them. Or they're given a chance. It might not be the first couple of games. They might need to get up to speed or whatever. All I ask is that they get a chance. And all the loan players this year, they've all had a chance. They've all scored a goal. All the players that we brought in January have scored a goal, for example. So they've all been on the pitch to score a goal. They've all developed in certain areas. So you take someone like Justin on his first loan spell. He had to find his feet a little bit. Comes on and he played 10 minutes against Notts County, and he had a chance at one end, and then he played 15 minutes. Then he played half an hour against someone, I think it was. Then he ends up playing his first game and doing okay, and then suddenly he scores 3 or 4 goals for us, something like that, and really crucial goals. And he was going to have a real good career. That's a young player that comes in on loan. You look at someone like Denver, who I know is not a loan player, but he hasn't played for such a long time. He does ever so well for 8 games, then has an absolute lull because the game's caught up with him, even at his age. So you have to then take him out of the team to then restart him again. And I thought last Saturday at Crawley, he was outstanding, for example. He was our best player. So you know that there's all these little things that you have to consider in their development, whether they're young, whether they're on loan. You try not to have financial penalties attached to it, but sometimes that's what the clubs do to get round the fact that they want them to play. But we would never be restricted. I would never take a loan player that has to play, or it makes it financially prohibitive if they didn't play. That's just reckless from my point of view. So, is that okay?
That was perfect. Sorry, I was just trying to find my cursor to unmute. We've got a question that is only fair to ask after, we've always been quite opinionated. Dan asked, fans and the pod like to analyse the team, the manager and board's performance. So don't hold back on how the fans did and the pod do. Where do you think we can all improve? Dan, you said manger, not manager, but I won't critique you on that.
I'm not answering that one.
You can do.
Yeah. I think. Yeah. Come on, be brave.
I don't mind it.
I'm happy to go. Look, oh, this is a good question, actually. So, look, the Guardian's not everyone's cup of tea, and I acknowledge that, right? It just happens to be, one of the most read newspapers globally, and I've got a chance to speak and have a platform in that every month on behalf of the Us and the town. And I do my thinking through writing and reflecting on stuff. And it's been real hard. This year's been really hard. I think all of us, in the bottom half of this picture, can't speak to you guys, like we've had long careers and we've got a lot of resilience, but sort of the season that we've had has been a real challenge. And that's a challenge both as a fan, like just not being satisfied with the level of the product and the experience, and then there's you put that on another level as an investor and someone that's trying to improve the organization as well. So it's been challenging on both levels. And so if you add into that, and I'm not just saying this, I think it's legitimate for people to have opinions about their football club. Like if I had them before I was on the cap table, and I'll have them long after I'm not on the cap table. The bit that I don't know the answer for is that I think we're losing, and this is more of a macro point, I think we're losing some of the sense of perspective and compassion and perspective sometimes in society. Like, I'd like to think that, we're trying to show up, and since day one, hopefully people have seen, we're trying to show up honestly and transparently, and when we've got stuff wrong, we have got stuff wrong, we've admitted it, that this is a learning curve for us. And we want to keep turning up, but it does become hard when, like, every time something goes wrong, people just jump on it with like a vitriol and nastiness and sometimes real bitterness that is hard to not take personal, quite frankly, right? So we're nowhere near throwing in the towel, and we can take it. And look, you have to take the bad times, you're going to take the good times, right? We accept that. But I do think there's been times where I've thought, people will condemn some of the decisions or or jump to judgment in a situation where I'd like to think we'd get a bit more of the benefit of the doubt. We care about this club. It's been in our identity and in our DNA, since we were both kids. And, and I guess no one's more motivated to get results than David, right? Like, it literally, he thinks about this 24/7. And so sometimes when you get the bitterness and sort of the recrimination of that, you sat there going, Christ, this is a challenge, right? So I don't know if that answers your question. It's weird. Like, if my kids were in a relationship that, when it goes bad, is all they're told is that they're terrible and they're shit and they're making bad decisions, I'd advise them not to be in that relationship anymore, rather than waiting for it to come good again. And so I don't know what the answer is, to be honest with you. I think our support is phenomenal. We're fans first and foremost, so it hurts us when things aren't going well. But there's been times this season where, if I nip onto the fishy or to the Twitter or wherever, and you're getting called out on it, you're like, Christ, we're trying our best. We might not be succeeding. I don't know how you do that. I mean, there's one point where I thought, I had half an article written about, I don't think fans should own football clubs. Like, if it matters so much to you, like it does to Andrew and I, the jeopardy of it going wrong. Like, my business, like 15 years ago, I was in a business that nearly went bust. And I was reflecting on that. I was like, yeah, even that, I was just trying to work out an option and raise money for it. And if it went to shit, I was going to go, oh, I'll fold it, I'll do what I can, I'll dust myself down, I'll go and start something else. That's not an option here, right? It's a 145-year-old football club, 46, and it's part of our identity, it's part of our DNA, it's the one constant, ever-changing world. So the jeopardy is so high. And so this idea of winning it together, it hasn't always felt like that. And that's a personal comment. Like when it's good, we love it. But when it goes to shit, it's all about our personal capabilities. And we're trying our hardest to improve this football club in this town. And I just wonder about the compassion and sense of perspective sometimes. So that's me being honest. I don't know if Andrew shares that, but like that's me speaking from the heart about this. Is like I love this club, and I know Andrew does, and we're trying to improve, trying to do everything we can with our resources to improve it. And when it got really bad, and it got bad, there's no shying away from that. What was beautiful was inside the building, we came together like, how we're going to solve this. And everyone, David, Sean, Ben, Gareth, Andrew, we stepped into that. We're like, we're in it together, let's solve this. And there's a little bit of like, we wrapped our arms around the group and said, look, we're going to dig out of this. And that was fantastic. But I'd love to feel like there's more people in that group at that point, as opposed to people just going, owners are shit and the manager needs sacking. Because that isn't actionable. So I'm rambling a little bit now because I'm being probably more honest than I need to be, but it has felt a little bit like, yeah, that jump to judgment and that jump sometimes to bitterness, recrimination, and vitriol has been like, wow, okay, well, you know, when you're trying to act with positive intent, to be on the other end of that, you go, yeah, sometimes you go, fucking hell, if I'm doing all this and I'm still getting shit, why am I doing this? And we're going nowhere, by the way. We take the ups and the downs, but that was a learning curve for us, and you know, it wasn't pleasant at sometimes. But fucking hell, we feel stronger for it as a group. We feel stronger for it, and we're going to do our damnedest not to get there back again. Guess what? We're ambitious, and we'll use that energy to fuel us. But yeah, it was hard. It was hard. I'd be lying if I said otherwise. Sorry, Andrew.
I couldn't add much more to that, but all I was going to say is that everyone's entitled to their opinion, and you know, we all have our opinions on everything that every fan does. It's just, I guess sometimes it's social media maybe the thing that amplifies how they get shared, and particularly if they're anonymous comments. I know Debbie had a very, very tough time last season through whether it was campaign or certainly one or two individuals who really took a dislike and were very offensive in how they interacted with her, and that's something that you know is not great, and it's not an illustration on Grimsby Town fans. It's an illustration on, I think, society as a whole. And I think, you know, we to Jason's point about compassion, I think there has to be a bit of a, you know, we all want to win on a Saturday. You know, we're not all going home and, you know, cracking open a beer, you know, when we lose 3-0 to Wrexham and think, oh, that was great. That was great.
I am.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe too many.
So you know, we go into this. You know, everyone, you know, from the beginning of the week to the end of the week, everybody is aiming in one direction to win a game of football, and we all, you know, universally feel better about it on a Saturday night when we've got 3 points, and we all universally feel shit when we haven't. But there's a way of communicating that, and there's a way of perhaps having those feelings and holding them to yourselves sometimes when rather than lashing out, I guess it would be my thought.
I think you're right about the society thing, Andrew. I mean, you know, go back in time, you go to the football on a Saturday, you go down the pub, call everybody every name under the sun, and nobody knows about it. But now you take out your phone just as you're leaving the ground, and you can call everybody, and everybody knows about it. And unfortunately, I think the vocal minority do get amplified to be sounded to what it's worth. So I think you're right. It's a society thing. Everybody thinks everybody wants to know what their opinion is.
I know,
says me.
Know,
but like in the spirit of Canada though as well. It's like, look, you guys have been quite vocal, and again as well about some of the decisions that we've made. I don't mind that, but it's all of us as well. So, you know, I think there's been some decisions about Paul, you know, and his tenure in the football club. I think there's been some things on social around, you know, some of the results and the training. I don't mind. It's the spirit of that. I think if I look at what you guys do, on balance, I feel like you want the best outcome for the football club. So I never look at those comments and go, oh, that's just a snipey thing. I think there's a long-term commitment to trying to improve, and we all want the same thing. I think there's just some of, if you look at some of the comments, they can get really personal. And it's like, someone tries to be empathetic and think about like what's happening in people's lives, that this is so, there's such an amount of aggression or vitriol for what's going on. But at the same time, like on some level, it goes, I think I've got pretty thick skin, but it does go in, right? And I wonder about, you know, a model of ownership. We want to be transparent. We want to turn up and have conversations about and be really frank about what's going on. But I think there's a danger that if it becomes toxic, people just take positions that aren't in any way commensurate with a good conversation and debate about trying to improve. I think once you get in those positions, and I think we were there historically, not before us, where it's like nothing that anyone said or did was part of the debate. And I worry about like if it gets so toxic, people just get entrenched in their positions, and there's never a good debate about how you can improve, because sometimes someone else will be right and sometimes you'll be right, and that's how you improve organizations, rather than thinking that you've got all the answers. And it exists in a debate and a discussion. And there's something about the toxic level, particularly on social media sometimes when things are going bad, which is, by the way, when you need support the most, that just pushes people into extreme positions. And again, this is probably another podcast about our politics and stuff, but I think we have got that as a society where people are more bothered about trying to take a view and defend it, as opposed to going, we want to improve. We want to be a better society. We want to be a better football club, which means we need all kinds of opinions in a way that has a level of compassion and respect for each other. And I just don't think, social media just doesn't seem the right vehicle for that. So I don't know what the answer is, but you know, something needs to change.
I've been on a journey of discovery, shall we say, this season about it, because I tweet the stuff from the podcast account, and during a game, it's an exile's way of being able to talk about it. And what would usually just be, oh, that was fucking shit, as you know, screamed out at the pod outside from the pontoon, which then just disappears into the ether, is actually just stays on Twitter and then can be not taken out of context, because it's not taken out of context, but instead of it just being at that height of that emotion, it's there then 24 hours later. So we've tried to remove that side of things. But I guess the one that I got the most from when I did it from my personal account, and it wasn't vitriol, but it was a pretty harsh opinion when I called a player pointless on that day. And that was done, you know, for that moment. But that was the one that got the most grievance from it. So, you know, different people have different things to go through. You know, for myself, you know, you spend your day working within war zones and in pieces like that. Then you come to a football game and it does change it. So I do agree with Jason. It does that. But I don't know, social media is one of these things where it's a tweet in a moment that lasts for a lifetime. And unless you remove it, it's always there. So we've tried to change it. But it's been, I think also...
So I think the points are really, like, we don't think about the medium of communication. I know it starts to sound pretentious, but like in my last business, I said to people, if you want to speak to me, call me. If you want something that needs a response today, put it on WhatsApp or Slack. And if you want me to get to when I get to it, it's an email. And thinking about modes of communication, right? If you're going to call someone a tosser and say they're putting their shit at their job, I don't think social media is the place for that. That might be a comment to your mate in the moment and the heat of the moment. Because actually, if I call a player a tosser to my brother who I sit next to, which I don't, by the way, but actually, if it's there forever, I don't think that guy's a tosser. I don't think it's pointless at his job. That's a heated moment. Now, the idea that you put that in a medium that's going to be there forever, and guess what? That player 2 or 3 days later is going to see that. It's just not constructive, and we just don't think about the medium we're communicating in. It's not right, to your point, Mike, it's not right that we judge players in the moment, but we make lasting, eternal comments about them because of the medium that we're communicating through. I think it's just really unhelpful. And as a society, we're not thinking about this. And so you put something on Twitter in the moment, and guess what? That becomes your opinion. And in fact, it could be a throwaway comment, but because it's enshrined in 180 or whatever it is these days characters, I think just something we need. I'm sure it'll correct over time. By the way, these mediums and these technologies are new and will correct over time. But I do think what people are shouting out for, it has a permanence to it and a sense of that it is your genuine opinion about that will last over time. And in fact, they're not. They're throwaway comments that we all say in the heat of a moment. And this is weird. But so if I go on Twitter on a Monday, which I don't do it on Saturday or Sunday now, but I see stuff and I'm like, actually, I read it as a comment about our judging our capability as a club, as players, as managers, as owners. When actually, in reality, what should be going is it's just an opinion on a Saturday afternoon after a couple of beers at the pub, which it should be, right? And that's fine. But we're conflating the medium and the message, and I think that's something that we need to think about sometimes because it is permanent.
Yeah, and you think we're more connected now than ever. So, we're in exile. I watch it on my own, in Bordeaux. And it's, there aren't many fans in the south of France. So, that's the form of communicating, rather than just being sat next to, like, the 2009-2010 season was absolutely the worst season we ever had. But it's probably one of the funniest ones I ever enjoyed because I was sat with my mates in the lower Finders watching people absolutely lose their minds, and not just Barry Conlon. So, it's a different form of medium. But yeah, we'll move on from that because it's always a thing. But I think genuinely, it's been a tough time, but I think the vast majority of fans are absolutely behind Jason, Andrew, and you, David, as well, in terms of what you want to do. And, there's a lot more water under the bridge for this club than most. So maybe some of that comes from past seasons as well.
And by the way, Byron, just to, sorry, I'm rabbiting on as always, but so I make a point on match days of trying to walk around Blundell Park before the game and just say hello to people and stuff, and I need that, because if I just engage through social media, you'd think the world's going to hell in a handcart. But if you go around BP or you go in the fan zone, there's so much positivity and love for this club and this town. And so that's where, this is this distorted view of the world through the sort of mediums that we've talked about. But actually, if you go into the town, or most people have got an opinion. Again, that's absolutely legitimate. But actually, there's a lot of love for what's going on. Even, and we've all had reason to not be happy this year. But like even the last few games when I was around BP, there's a lot of people where we're still really positive about the future and the potential of the club. So again, I don't want people to think that we feel like it's a negative and there isn't support. It's been quite overwhelming sometimes. So the amount of positivity, which we haven't always deserved this year, and I've just gone on record of saying that. But there is a definite difference between what you see online and actually when you go into the town or around the ground on match days.
If I could just add one thing, which is again about the medium of social media. Again, it's one thing talking to your mates. It's another thing in a group chat where it's private. It's a completely different thing where effectively you're the equivalent of standing in the middle of Town Hall Square and being a town crier in the old days and shouting out your opinion. That's ultimately what you're doing on social media, because everyone can see it, and that. There's good things and bad things about doing that, but again, if one takes a step back to think about that's ultimately what you're doing, probably some of the things wouldn't be said.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Mike, did you have a question? You've unmuted and Oh, that's a mark against your name. I guess the only thing is you had 740 fans at Crawley for the deadest of rubbers. That says, I think, a lot about the fans.
Amazing turnout. Again, lots of exiles as well, but no, it was incredible turnout for what was.
Do you know what, Andrew? I thought that as well, but you think how many Bradford fans live in London, and the same in Barrow, and wherever else it might be. I just think it's incredible, and Crawley's a nice place to visit and all, but 740 of them. The last question, which is the most important, where are we going on pre-season?
South London would be great.
Not Cleethorpes.
I don't think it's been finally decided yet, but I think with budgetary constraints, we want to put as much money as we can into the first team budget. It's likely to be somewhere locally within the UK.
The Yorkshire tour.
No, Gibraltar's part of the UK. Well, is there anything before we go? Because I know we've taken up quite a lot of your guys' times. Is there anything in particular you want to say, or anything we haven't asked that you'd like to address? Is the wrong word, but to put out there.
No, there was one thing that I think I set a bit of a hair running again, unfortunately, around when I talked about the last interview with John Tonda about the budget is looking horrendous, terrible if they're in League Two and horrendous if they're in the National League. And just to qualify that, is that, the things that we'd hoped for that would be resolved this year was the Premier League and EFL deal that would help bridge the gap towards the investment that we're trying to make in the club. The club would be loss making this year, as with the year we're just coming out of, and because of that, it's even worse. So that's why National League was just going to be horrific for us, because it takes away some of the solidarity payments. So there's a loss this year, but we're trying to protect and improve on the playing budget through income and investment as well. So, I don't want people worrying about, we're not cutting costs in the first team squad. We are looking at the ROI and our investments across the club in general over the last 3 years to make sure we're getting the return. We want to be ambitious for this football club and really move it on. And I think, we've spent money in the last 3 years, and we want to take a review on whether that's really had the impact that it could. But I don't want people worrying about the first team budget. We're trying to make sure that we give David and the coaches the tools to improve this football club. And I think we've got an opportunity. We're really optimistic about next year when we look at the opportunity to get some data and evidence into the recruitment process. But ultimately, David's got to make the decision about the people that he likes and play to a style that we want to play to. So I just wanted to make that comment. I think I'd worried a few people. It's the overall finance of the football club is shocking. It's loss making. It will continue to be loss making, until we find a way of getting that Premier League deal sorted and also improve the commercial options. But that won't be the detriment of the playing budget for next year. We're trying to improve that where we can.
Perfect, thank you. Well, all I can do is thank you. It's easy enough to come on here when we do we reach an FA Cup quarter final for the laughs, but it's another thing to come on when we've had a poor season, and I can only thank you for that and the work you guys do, all of you, because it's a special place, and we're so glad that you guys are all in charge of it and running it as the way you can do. I think that's it. Anything from you two gents before we go? Sam, you got any more votes to do, or can you go home now?
No, well, not going to go home. I'm going to go downstairs to the pub, but no.
And tweet.
Yeah, it's going to. It's that taxpayer subsidised bar, isn't it?
No, I'm going off the estate, so it's fine.
I just had one small thing which sort of Jason sort of led me on to something he just said is, as an exile, I don't get to Blundell Park very often. It's very rare I can get up in a season. I was lucky enough to go up at the end of the season for the Bradford and Newport games. I was staying in Cleethorpes. And I must say to all of you, Jason, Andrew, and you, David, that it was one of the better experiences I've ever had coming back home and going back to Blundell Park. Blundell Park was looking good. The fans were nice, as you're saying, and we're chatting, what have you. So I do think a lot of us that maybe haven't escaped Grimsby start to undervalue what we've got. And I came back up from South London and spent 2 weeks there, and I sort of fell in love with the town again. So for what's going on at Blundell Park and looking after it, just thank you. I think I think some of us need to realise what we've got is the point I'm trying to make.
That's really kind of you, Mike. We appreciate that. And likewise, look, what you might like this comment or not, but I listen to the pod nearly all the time. So we want the ideas, we want the debate. No need to blush, Sam. I've heard some of the comments, but ultimately, it's important that we get feedback. We're open to it. That's the only way you improve, quite frankly. And so I really appreciate the work that you do and the way you keep a lively debate about the club and the fan base going. I think it's a really great job, and it's. I think it's important to keep that debate going. So thank you as well. Right. Is this the last duty of the year? Can you at least all have a week off now? That's it. The season's done now. That is officially, it is over. This is the close. Now, what that means is David and I have already spoken to that. There's no rest in terms of we're trying to recruit players. We're trying to recruit players for months, quite frankly. So I'm hoping, I know I get a bit of a break probably in July, but David's into pre-season. So he's got pace and stuff. But no, we've run a marathon, got to the end of last weekend, and we've started another one straight away. So, but it's exciting. There's a different energy to it because we can build now. and again, we started last season. We thought we've learned a lot, and I think what we're going to put into this next is we're hopeful. Although the day you don't feel optimistic about the future is the day you should jack it in, and we're all really optimistic about the future and what we can do. But there's definitely no downtime.
You're making it sound like David is the hardest geezer.
I don't know about that. just don't. There's just no days off. That's all it is. Which is a pleasure. It's a privilege. I say that I don't want sympathy. It's a privilege.
Sorry, Andrew.
That's what it is.
And the data will tell you that in August we start on level number of points with everybody else. So, ever the optimist.
Yeah. Are you saying that we need to change our name to AFC Grimsby so we're, top of the league?
No, that's part of our heritage assets. We won't be permitted after the regulator is in place to do that without full approval of the fans. So no, it's not going to happen.
That's fair enough. Well, thank you all very much for listening. We're going to take a couple of weeks off too, because I think we need it mentally. And then we'll be back, and we'll probably be talking about England crashing out of the Euros at some point very shortly, instead, or out of the T20 World Cup instead, maybe. But thank you all so much, and we shall see you all soon. See you later.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.